Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I am Christian Moe for AutoTalk.com. This is time for another driving review, and this week we are in the 2015 Infiniti Q50S sedan.
The 2015 Infiniti Q50S is the new small sedan from the Japanese marque. While it competes in the same space as machines like the BMW 3 Series, the Q50S abandons the German's traditionally staid style for an aggressive and attractive shape that is smooth and organic. The large greenhouse and wide rear haunches give the car a look of purpose, and the aggressive details like the sleek hawk-like headlamps and the gaping grille give the nose a very angry and racy feel. Of course, the most noticeable exterior item is the dark 19-inch raised alloy wheels that are all new for 2015. Of course, there is more to a car in this segment than just its looks. The interior needs to be loaded with tech and luxury to be taken seriously.
So the exterior of the Q50S is very much modern, dynamic, sporty. The interior, though, is a lot more sort of subtle and classic, and I really enjoy sort of hanging out in here. So starting from the driver's cockpit, for one, I've got these great bolstered leather seats. They're really adjustable, forward, back, up, down, all the usual directions, but I've also got power adjustable bolsters, and of course I do have the manually adjustable thigh bolster if you have really long legs, which is not a problem that I have, sadly. And then you just have your sort of little driver's cockpit here, and the whole thing sort of swoops down at an angle, and everything's sloped in just slightly towards you and up and out. So all the surfaces here, the door panel sort of arcs in and carries a curve. It's not flat, so it sort of makes you feel a little bit cocooned. Then you have the steering wheel, which is just like the one that I had in the Audi last week. Really nicely sculpted. It's not as sculpted as the one in the A3 was, but I've got nice little hitches on the outside to catch the outside of your palms, nice deep thumb grooves, solid grips up here at 10 and 2. Nice little beautiful touches. It's covered with a nice leather. The controls are well spaced on the steering wheel, and they're all right where you think you should be. You can reach the cruise control and the volume easily with your thumb. You only have to move in a little bit to hit the inside buttons, which are buttons you're not going to reach that often. And yeah, like I said, everything is just sort of catered towards you, and it's all very easy and quick to get to. So everything that happens up here on the navigation screen happens with this knob. So again, it's really easy to reach. It's very uniquely shaped. It has this wonderful little knurling on the edge, so you always know you're grabbing the right one. Next to it are 3 buttons, where the middle one is raised much higher than the other 2, so you can definitely feel which button you're on and get that correct. So like, they took care of all those things that you would want to reach and operate stuff without taking your eyes off the road. Volume is just a little knob that you can easily reach right from the top of the shift knob. The only thing that I don't like is to change the channel on the satellite radio, or to change the song if you're listening to your iPod or Bluetooth, or if you have a CD in there. Those are less sort of obvious, so you have to look for a second to figure out what those ones are. But everything else is quick and easy reach. Temperature controls right up here. Again, I don't even have to look. I can just run my hand. I know the top 2 are the up and down buttons for the temperature. So it's really easy to sort of handle and drive. And of course, because this has the 7-speed auto, I do have these great big paddle shifters. They are modeled after the ones you get in the GTR. So they are nice, and they are metal, and they have this little leather bit glued onto the back of them. Really nice and grippy, really easy to hang on to. They make a nice snap noise when you pop on them. Doesn't sound as good as some that I've played with, but it does make a good noise. They do respond really quickly. I do enjoy it. It's nice to have. But so, like luxury features, I've got leather everywhere. So I'm gonna have leather on the wheel and the shift knob and the seats, and here on the center console, and here on the dash. And down here on the dash, they have leather, and it's stitched in this nice little like sort of wave pattern. It looks really nice. And then I've got this trim that is plastic, but it's got this beautiful little diamond design. It's little white diamonds and little black dots between the diamonds, and it gives it a cool look. And they've also textured it, like the paint is almost raised from the surface. So it's got kind of a nice texture that's good to touch. I like how you have this line that comes from the cabin, sort of swoops in towards you. Here's my little drive mode for sport and manual, or sport standard and eco rather. So again, it's nice the way it sort of swoops out for me and sort of encloses me in. And then the top of the instrument cluster here, I've got 2 big center gauges, one on either side, and each has their own little sort of binnacle across the top of it. And then in the center, I've got a multifunction screen that shows me my fuel economy and my range and all that sort of stuff. So that's just standard fare. But again, from the cockpit, it's really nice. I do have the upgraded Bose stereo. I do have a lot of the upgraded technology options. So I've got my big screen up top that handles all of my nav stuff. And And then I have another screen here in the center that is a touch screen, and that handles audio and climate and the app control, because I can hook up a cell phone and do app stuff through this. All that sort of works great. It's really nice. I really don't have very many complaints about the interior. It does feel more open than a lot of cars in the class. I like the color choices. I like the designs. I've got bright up top, dark in the middle, and then bright again on the seats. Again, I like the way this is done. I like that texture. I like the metal that they use. Everything just looks and feels nice. The Bose stereo upgrade that I've got in here sounds fantastic. It's one of the better stereos of a car in this class that I've listened to. So like, I really am digging this car. There's a lot to like about it, and there's not a lot to dislike. I will say footwell space seems cramped. I'm not a very big person, but it's like there's the dead pedal and then you're almost immediately on the brake. Like if they were to sell this with a manual, there's almost no room for a clutch. Like that's how tight the footwell seems to be to me. Once you get past the footwell, it does widen up again, but it just sort of narrows down right in your foot in the footwell. And again, for really sporty driving, it sort of works. But when you're using this as a commuting machine, I just constantly felt like I was fidgeting a little bit because my legs were a little bit cramped. But otherwise, lots of glass, really easy to see out of. The blind spots in the back are not huge. Of course, I got a nice sunroof there if I want some extra light. Back seats are very big, very comfy. I've had people back there, no one complained. Trunk is gigantic. So from like a usability standpoint and a luxury standpoint, the interior is very nice. It's not outlandish and wild like the exterior is. It's very sedate, very classic, it's very nice. I have lots of clean cut lines, stuff like that. Lots of gentle curves, it's very organic. So if you're somebody who sort of likes the idea of having a wild looking car, but you don't want to have a wild looking interior, this sort of takes care of that. But this is the Q50S, and that S stands for Woohoo Super Sport Fun. So why don't we stop talking about the inside of this thing and get around to driving it. If you want a sports sedan that's just as much fun to drive as it is to look at, the Q50S is a really good place to start. So underneath the hood, making all that sort of rumbly, raspy noise, is Nissan's VQ37 engine. So that's a 3.7 liter V6 that is shared with the 370Z. So it's a sports car engine. It's a fun little engine. It makes 329 horsepower, like 260 pound-feet of torque. It's not the most powerful engine in the class, especially for being a 3.7 liter, but it feels good. It's willing to rev. Redline is 7,500 RPM, and the car will go all the way there. If you slap the little stick over into the manual mode, you can actually drop some cogs, and it'll just peg itself against that rev limiter and just sit there, pow, 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 as long as you ask it to. When you're trying to slow down, shifts are really quick. You hit the brakes and you pull the paddle, and the 7-speed shifts really quickly. It's not as good as some of the double clutch things that are out there. It's not as good as some of the really good automatics, like the one in the Corvette. But it is very quick, it does respond well. You can downshift and the car will rev almost all the way to the red line. The closest I've gotten it on a downshift is about 7 grand, so it gives you 500 or so RPM on playroom, but that's about it. So if you're really coming down hard, you can rev the snot out of this car to help you cut speed with the engine. If you don't want to drive like a hooligan, you can hit my little drive switch mode here, put it in standard, and the car becomes a little bit nicer. You can give it a little bit more push on the throttle before it'll downshift, stuff like that. It becomes a bit more civilized, but it still never stops being fun. So this has Nissan's little adaptive steering thing that is in their new Infiniti cars. So basically, the way it's been explained to me is my steering wheel isn't actually really attached to my wheels when I'm doing this. It's all electronic motors. So when I put it in the sport mode, it gets a little bit heavier, just a little bit tighter. And they say it is much quicker and much more precise and responsive than a standard steering system. Basically, by using the motors and things, I can turn this car faster than the car could turn on its own. So I will accept that. Turning is obnoxiously fast. Every time you touch the wheel, you get an instant response from the wheels. And somehow they managed to give me like feedback and weight, and it sort of works. I'm not sure what voodoo they did to make that happen, but it does. Now, if you're like me and you worry about weird electronic things, there is actually a shaft that goes from this steering wheel to the wheels, so if all the electronics fail, your car will still turn, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's really interesting system, and surprisingly, I kind of like the way it feels and I like the way it works. As for the actual overall chassis balance and handling of the car, it is good, but it is not great. So up until about 7 or 8 tenths, the car is fantastic. Body roll is really well controlled, steering feels great, turning is really sharp, a lot of the responses feel really crisp. But once you really, really push it, it starts to fall apart a bit. So I took it down to the tail of the Dragon and I beat on it to go up to the top and then back down to the bottom as fast as I could. And once you, really, really get into it, it has a hard time with really quick transitions. So in a lot of spots on the Dragon, you have a really sharp right followed by a really sharp left. And it's really easy to unsettle the car on those. You'll make the first turn and the car will bite and hang very quickly. But the moment you try and transition to the other side, it gets a little soft, it gets a little wallowy, it wants to fall over on you. And I've actually, a couple times, I had to have the little stability control kicked in because it thought I was going a little too sideways or a little bit too fast, and it thought I was going to crash. And it's like, we will save you, and lights flash and the brakes come on and the car comes more or less to a stop. And as far as I know, you can't turn that off. In sport mode, you can turn the traction control off, and the car will give you a bit of yaw and a bit of lean, but if you really hoon on it and you really get crazy, it will step in to try and save you. So as long as you're not really, really pushing this car, like if you're not going to track it, which I don't think most people will track a family sedan, the car's great. It just, once you push it beyond that more than comfortable zone, it starts to get a little sloppy, a little bit iffy. Another point where I have problems is the brakes. The actual brakes themselves are fantastic. So let's get moving here. 65 miles an hour and I almost lost my camera. Stopped. And that wasn't even full braking power. That was maybe a three-quarter pedal. So brakes work very well, but when you're really driving it on a twisty back road, hitting the brakes can unsettle the car, especially if you have even just the slightest bit of lock on. So there are a couple spots where you're going a little bit quickly through a long sweeper, and then you need to brake quickly for a sharp turn. So you're coming around that long sweeper, you're straightening out, you have just the slightest bit of lock on it, and you nail that pedal, and the car sort of wants to crab walk itself a little bit. It's almost like the wheels sort of toe in and you lose just a bit of stability. So I'm not really sure what's up with that, but as long as you're not really hard braking like just after a corner or just before a big corner, like it sort of works okay. You know, as you just saw, like when you're completely straight and you're on a straight road, it sort of does okay. But again, with that suspension, it works great up to 8 tenths. Once you really start to push past those normal limits, it sort of gets a bit squiggly, a bit uncomfortable. But there are some really good things about this car. Like I said, for the most part, the suspension's fantastic. If you want to hoon a bit, again, you can put it in sport mode like I've got it. You can hit the little traction control off button. It'll make all kinds of noise. It'll squeal tires. You can do big donuts in a parking lot if you want to act like a jerk. So it's a lot of fun. And the motor itself is actually extremely responsive. So again, it's not the most powerful thing in the class, but if you get moving, oh, there's a bit of that sideways, and you step on it, the car really just wants to lurch you forward. And you hit those big brakes, come to a stop. Yeah, the motor's good. It doesn't make the greatest noise, especially for being the fact that this is a luxury car, but it makes noise, which is a good start. And it is quick. Like, this car is deceivingly quick. 60 miles an hour comes around in about 6 seconds. I'd say maybe if I had proper tires on a really good road, this is wearing really nice sticky rubber, but it's been sort of damp the last couple of days here in Tennessee, so I've not had a really good chance to get a really good launch on a really good road. So everything's been in that like 6 second range. It feels like you could get closer to the mid fives if you could really get a chance to push it. So again, I dig it a lot. I'm really having fun with this machine. Like I said, steering's good. I already talked about the comfort inside this cabin. Feels great in here. Stereo's great. Like I said, all my fancy equipment's great. Brakes are good. You know, there's not a lot to complain about this machine. If I said there was a weakness about this car as a whole, it's probably the competition or the price. So as this one sits, let me get my fancy Monroney sticker out here. This one is $47,755, which is not a lot of money for the class, but it's also not cheap. And that's a problem, because when somebody goes into a dealership and they see an Audi badge or they see a BMW badge and then they see an Infiniti badge, a lot of people are willing to pay just a little bit more money for that nicer badge. So I think Infiniti should cut a few dollars off the price. Again, this car has tons of equipment. You've got those great big 19-inch alloy wheels with the little sport package thing. I've got the nice engine, I've got all the leather in here, I've got all the tech equipment. I mean, this is a great machine. I have everything that you could want. But it's just a little too close to the price of the competition. I think that'll cause some problems. If you're a buyer who's looking for something out of the ordinary and you don't want a BMW or an Audi or a Mercedes, this is definitely a great choice. But there's also the Cadillac ATS, which is a lot like this in a lot of ways. It feels a lot alike, but the Cadillac is a little more polarizing on looks, let's say. You know, a lot of people don't like the really square edges. They want the nice, softer, organic look of this car. And also, the ATS feels a bit more cavey. The cabin's really tight. It's not as big or as open as this. It's a little low on space compared to this. So overall, this is definitely a good choice in the market. I just wish I could see it maybe $2,000 or $3,000 cheaper. Like, if they could keep underneath that 45 grand price point, this would be a phenomenal buy. It would be a steal. And I could see a lot of people that are even looking for the German brands sort of looking this way. Because if you want to buy a BMW, you want that badge, and I get that. But when this is $5,000 cheaper, like, that's a big difference, and that's enough of a difference that some people might go, well, it's still nice to drive, and it still looks really nice, so maybe I could give it a shot. Anyways, once again, I am Christian Moe for AutoTalk.com. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it. As always, you can find the full written review with a whole pile of photos for this car on our website at AutoTalk.com. Please feel free to hit that like button if you like this video. Hit the dislike button if you disliked it. If you did dislike it, please let us know what we're doing wrong. We want to make these things better for you, and the only way we can do that is if we know what to fix. So anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out. Like I said, hit that subscribe button. You'll get a new video usually every single week. Head over to AutoTalk.com for all your favorite news and reviews and anything else you want to see. I'm Christian Moe. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I'll see you next week. Cheers.